Leonis was a deadbeat, pathetic demon lord who reincarnated as a weakling 1,000 years into the future. However, everything changes when he gets admitted to a swordsman academy, where he meets all types of powerful girls who want to clap him. He was sealed in a magical barrier crystal when Celia shockingly finds him while investigating in underground ruins. Meanwhile, 1,000 years before, the demon lord was tasked with finding the human who would become the vessel of goddess Roselia's power. Celia begins to shoot at the seal, surprising the demon lord inside, who wonders if it has already been 1,000 years and if the reincarnation ritual worked. The seal soon begins to crack, and he wonders what the heck is going on since it is supposed to be impenetrable. However, he concludes the human shooting must be tired of her existence and decides to do the honors of sending her to Nirvana. So he suddenly unleashes an enormous power that blasts the crystal open, knocking Celia to the ground in the process. When he steps out, the idiot becomes so distracted by how beautiful she is that he even forgets that he had planned to fulfill her death wish. Celia regains consciousness and becomes stunned upon seeing that a young boy is in such a place. Hearing this, Leonis sees his reflection in the broken crystal seal and is shocked when he sees the face of a young ugly boy, making him think that the ritual failed. He wonders why he had returned to the form he had when he was known as Leonis the hero. Meanwhile, Celia asks him why he was in the crystal, but he is too shocked to talk, making her reason that he has a fuzzy memory due to the trauma. So she switches into big sis mode and embraces him with her melons pressed on his face. He immediately counts this as disrespect and struggles to free himself, but he soon passes out when those soft pillows give him a heavenly experience. A couple of minutes later, while he eats some cookies Celia gave him, he wonders if he passed out because of the huge pillows or due to hunger that he can now feel. However, he wishes she gave him her cakes to eat instead of cookies. But he concludes that he owes her life since she is sharing her rations with him. Celia interrupts his messed up thoughts by introducing herself as Rosilia Ray Crystalia, a swordswoman in training going to Excalibur Academy. But the dude doesn't understand what the heck she is talking about because his brain works on APK, not iOS. He decides to use his young boy persona to his advantage to get information on the present world out of her. He introduces himself as Leonis Magnus, and Celia asks him if he was kidnapped and locked up in the crystal by the voids since he could not have been here on his own, considering his age. Leonis wonders what void means, and Celia instantly realizes she is dealing with a stage 4 amnesia level patient here. She then explains that voids are enemies of humanity that suddenly appeared from an unknown world 64 years ago, whom no one seems to know anything about or what they want. She reveals that she and her friend came to the ruins to investigate them, as they have been known to appear in ancient ruins. Hearing this, Leonis is shocked and asks her what holy god calendar year it is, but she doesn't understand what the hell that is. They suddenly hear a quake, and Regina informs her that a colossal void has been detected. She immediately enters combat mode as an ugly beast who looks like you appears and begins to shoot at it, but the void isn't affected a bit. Leonis quickly prepares to unleash his power, because he will not have such a god-forsaken monster desecrate his palace, but he falls to the ground because he hasn't yet read the memo on how to fight in a human body. Regina suddenly appears to assist with her intercontinental ballistic missile. She goes holy sword mode and unleashes a terrible blast that leaves Leonis stunned because he has never seen such a weapon. However, the void withstands the effect of the explosion, even making the newbie more surprised. Regina tells Celia to leave with the boy while she handles the void instead, so Celia immediately grabs Leonis and starts heading for the exit. Meanwhile, Leonis thinks he is just a worthless failure with the Demon Lord title, since his body is too frail to return his kingdom to its former glory. He wishes to go back and destroy the monsters destroying his palace, but can't because he doesn't want to expose his identity yet, as he still needs to gather information from Celia. Meanwhile, as they escape, another void appears before them, causing Leonis to consider taking it down, even though Celia might catch a glimpse of his power as the Demon Lord. However, Celia tells him to step back while she takes on the monster, but the monster immediately attempts to hit Leonis, who is already also preparing to attack. Celia quickly pushes him out of harm's way and gets hit instead, causing fatal damage. As she dies, she tells him to run away and apologizes for not protecting him. He instantly recalls when he was once dying and Goddess Roselia offered him the chance to be her hero. 3 voids begin to attack him at once as he processes the loss of the girl who was supposed to be his informant. Then, he instantly summons his weapon and unleashes his power, crushing the first void, piercing through the second, and roasting the third into a burnt barbecue. Afterward, he becomes exhausted due to his frail body. And then, even though he doesn't value human life, he decides to pay tribute to Celia's noble soul, because she risked her life in an attempt to protect him. So he casts a spell on her, instantly reincarnating her. As soon as she opens her eyes, she immediately hugs him in excitement, but she wonders how she is still alive, despite the severity of her injury, and he tells her he used holy sorcery to heal her. However, she doesn't know what sorcery it is and thinks it is his holy sword, just like Regina's, so Leonis decides to play along. She reveals that she has not been blessed with a holy sword yet, and just then, Regina comes back to meet them. Regina asks how they defeated the void, and Leonis lies that they just happened to get lucky, since it was the monster's fasting day. They soon hop on their bikes and head for the 7th Assault Garden. Upon seeing this massive cyberpunk city, Leonis realizes he is really 1,000 years into the future. Meanwhile, 6 years ago, when several voids invaded the 3rd Assault Garden, Celia had assured the terrified Regina that the Holy Knights, which also included his parents and siblings, had everything in control and would definitely obliterate the monsters. However, her family died in that battle, making her sad because she thought she had lied to Regina, who trusted her words. Moreover, this time, she swears never to let that happen again. Upon reaching the Assault Garden, Leonis is fascinated by all he sees, especially the fact that the whole city floats on water. Celia gives a report over the phone about their investigation of the ruins, stating that they brought back a refugee boy who seems to possess a holy sword. Regina is surprised that such a young boy has awakened his holy sword power. Celia tells Regina that it was what he used to heal her, making her conclude that he wasn't just some helpless, weak-ass refugee anyway. Meanwhile, Leonis seems lost and asks what the refugee they have been discussing means. Regina says it's a word for describing unintelligent boys who don't read their dictionaries. You little idiot.
What do you mean by that?
Celia adds that searching for such people in various countries is another one of the Assault Garden's missions. She then tells him that he will live with them at Excalibur Academy from now on, an educational institution where people who can use holy swords are trained to become holy swordsmen. Following this, Regina leaves to handle some other things while Celia shows him the door he needs to pass through to be examined since he is an outsider. She then leaves to wait for him at the exit while he enters through the door. On getting in, he summons his maid and his familia, who had been in hibernation for the last 1,000 years. The fox asks him why the heck he is looking like he was cropped out of a horror movie, and he explains that it's because the reincarnation ritual didn't work as planned, so he was brought back in his human form from the old days. Meanwhile, his maid, Sherry, tells him he looks so cute in this appearance, unlike when he looked like a low-budget Ghost Rider without flames, but Leonis tells her to shut the fuck up. He then gives them the task of analyzing humanity's current military strength by finding the other 6 Assault Gardens because this will be useful in rebuilding his demonic army. Sherry asks him what he will do instead, and Leonis replies that he will infiltrate the human military education facility. Sherry becomes jealous that he will be relating with humans and other baddies besides her, because she wants to be the only one he is banning now that he looks mogged. He soon dismisses them and goes on inside to be examined by the lowly crappy tech made by humans, which makes him quite uncomfortable. As soon as he gets out and receives his ID, Celia takes it from him and tells him she now has everything she needs to schedule his holy sword inquiry. She explains that everyone who enrolls in the academy must register their holy sword's properties, after which they will receive an official student ID card. Hearing this, Leonis immediately thinks he has to improvise his weapon and fool them so he won't be exposed. Afterward, Celia takes Leonis on a tour around the Assault Garden, and he is especially fascinated by how big the Excalibur Academy facility is. Meanwhile, as they wander around like sheep without a shepherd, Celia suddenly gets tired and tells Leonis that she has to resume training as soon as she is done resting at the dorm, because she has to get her holy sword ASAP. However, Leonis thinks it seems rigged to have this weakling, who lacked the power of a holy sword, enrolled in a military academy. As they continue walking, they pass by 2 hotties who immediately start feeling Leonis, and one of them says she can only imagine how skilled he would be in plot development. They are soon faced by some low-class bullies, led by a dweeb called Musil. Celia ignores and tries to avoid them, but the cocky bastard stops her and intensifies his bullying, asking if she now babysits young adults as he sees Leonis. Celia replies that Leonis is a full-fledged holy swordsman, but Musil tells her to stop the cap, which makes Leonis feel insulted, but he decides to be the older brother here since he can't draw attention to himself anyway. Musil then invites Celia to join his platoon, which is believed to be at the top of the hierarchy, so she won't be expelled from the academy because she failed to manifest a holy sword despite it being in her blood. Hearing this, Leonis realizes that she has not been able to live up to the high expectations of her lineage. Leonis tells him, "No, thank you," and attempts to leave, but Musil grabs her by her hair and tells her to stop being a bitch. Leonis becomes pissed and secretly casts a spell that knocks the idiot to his knees. He then warns him not to lay his filthy hands on that chick again before releasing him. Musil gets back to his feet and immediately summons his holy sword, but one random useless girl with 4 magical balls appears and stops him from doing something silly. Musil and his company of fools leave in shame, and the new girl introduces herself as Philip, a member of Celia's platoon who is in charge of data analysis. She apologizes to Celia for not following her on the mission earlier that day, as she was busy computing the data of a strange magical reaction in the area. As she yaps about it, Celia suddenly becomes weaker, and Leonis suspects that she must be getting close to running dry, or whatever the heck that means. Following this, Celia takes him to the female's dorm, where he will now live, but he wonders if it is okay for a boy like him to be in his girl's dorm. She tells him not to worry since he is just a harmless young adult who wouldn't touch any girl, surprising him because she doesn't know what his holy sword down there is capable of.
You sussy baka.
He soon heads to the bathroom, and as he bathes, Celia joins him for a shower plot. As she washes his hair, she invites him to join her platoon to compensate for the little favor she has done him. He then asks why she is so bent on putting herself on the battlefield when she can just have a legendary plot master bend her over on a different battlefield, while she also receives protection. However, she tells him she doesn't just want to be a receiver, but also a giver. As she talks, she suddenly collapses, and seeing this, Leonis activates a crest on her thigh, which reveals her fangs. Then he allows her to drink his red juice. She immediately returns to her senses and wonders what just happened, to which he replies that he lied to her about healing her with the power of a holy sword. He then reveals that Rosilia Ray Crystalia is dead. Celia wakes up the next day and is surprised to find herself in bed, since she collapsed in the bathroom. He tells her not to worry as he used sorcery in carrying her to the bed, and he didn't peep since there is nothing that caught his attention on her dead flat body anyway. This prompts her to ask for his identity, and he reveals that he is the reincarnation of an ancient sorcerer, and it was with the same sorcery that he resurrected her as one of his minions. He adds that he used a level 10 spell called Create Elder Undead, and she has now become the most prestigious type of undead, a vampire queen. He then explains that she became weak the previous day due to insufficient mana, so she sought out his blood as it is necessary to replenish her mana supply. Hearing this, Celia begins to narrate her past to him. Her hometown was attacked by voids when she was 9 years old, and this led to the death of every member of her family who were also holy swordsmen. After this, the Excalibur Academy took her and Regina into custody, as they were the only ones who survived the invasion. Since being a holy swordsman runs in her blood, it made sense for her to be in the academy even though she had not yet awakened her holy sword. So she began to participate in dangerous missions, as she thought that fighting voids might speed up the awakening process. But unfortunately, the only thing she has awakened is herself from sleep every morning. She asks Leonis if she can still awaken her holy sword now that she is no longer alive, and he replies that he doesn't know. But what he knows is that she will be vastly stronger than before. His stomach suddenly protests for the loud noise, making him embarrassed, and Celia decides to take him to a classy restaurant nearby. At the restaurant, she asks him if she can eat since she barely has any appetite, and he tells her she can since she is the most elite species of vampire. However, her digestive system isn't very efficient at converting food into mana, meaning she will only use them to poo. While they decide on what to eat, Leonis offers to pay and summons a gold raider coin, which he claims that its worth could buy everything in the whole restaurant. But his jaw hits the ground when she tells him that it's useless, as the Assault Gardens only accept credit as payment, not some old forsaken coin. Leonis immediately realizes he is as broke as you because the 2,000 coins he had set aside to rebuild his army are nothing but toy collections. They suddenly notice some men in black ripoffs trying to retrieve their loans from a blue-haired girl named Sakuya, and she tells them to be patient till the coming week. However, the idiots don't listen and try to harass her, so she teaches them a little lesson, which will become a legacy to their unborn generations. Afterward, Celia approaches her and Sakuya explains that they were bouncers from the casino, where she gambled the previous day. Celia becomes worried because this chronic broke-ass gambles away all her money, hoping to hit it big someday. However, Celia introduces her to Leonis as her platoon's vanguard attacker, who, even as a newcomer, has managed to send several voids to Lucifer in hell. Leonis exchanges handshakes with her, and he is fascinated by how sturdy her palms are, typical of someone who lives by the blade or gives a professional hand service. Following this, Leonis goes to an examination to determine the type of holy sword he possesses. As the test begins, he immediately summons his magic staff, and the examiner, being surprised that his holy sword is strange, suggests that it could be an ability type, but he tells her it is a support type. However, as they prepare the void simulators to fight him, he instantly destroys them in one hit, shocking the examiner, who immediately states that that definitely is not a support type weapon. She becomes suspicious and says this requires further investigation. However, Musil suddenly steps steps forward as she prepares an alternative simulator and volunteers to fight him. Leonis accepts immediately, and as soon as Celia sees that Musil is fighting alongside his side chicks, which he claims are his weapons, she joins the fight to assist Leonis. Seeing this, Musil states that if Team Leonis loses, Celia must join his platoon, and Leonis agrees immediately. He also says that Musil must swear never to mess with her again if he loses. The battle soon begins and Leonis and Celia quickly incapacitate Musil's chicks, leaving only him. Celia quickly charges at him to strike him, but he freezes her with his magic wand and knocks her sword out of her hand. He then walks toward Leonis, saying he has to dispose of him first. Meanwhile, Celia becomes angry as the desperation to protect Leonis rises within her. Suddenly, a bright light shines between her exalted hands, and her holy sword awakens instantly, shocking everyone. She immediately charges at Musil again, who quickly tries to freeze her again, but she destroys his holy sword with her sword, terrifying him and causing the overconfident fool to surrender. Later that evening, Celia thanks Leonis and then tells him to make her even stronger. They celebrate Celia's holy sword awakening, and after that, Leonis spends some time in Sakuya's room. Back in Celia's room, Leonis summons Blackus while Celia bathes and asks about his findings so far. Blackus tells him that he discovered that the humans have a large power plant that seems to be distributing mana throughout the entire city. Hearing this, Leonis reasons that it would be a valuable asset if he could lay his hands on it. Sherry comes up next, but instead of giving a worthy report, she shows him the hole in her donut and tells him he can put his sausage in it.
What do you mean by that?
However, she reveals that no one in the city knows anything about him, nor about the war that took place 1,000 years ago. As she talks, she notices that a lady is inside and becomes jealous, realizing that Leonis has turned a new girl into one of his minions. Meanwhile, on the outskirts of the city, while some divers investigate a particular area in the sea, a monster calls out Leonis' name and suddenly begins to attack. Meanwhile, 1,000 years before, Leonis was betrayed and unalived by some greedy men who felt he was doing too much as a hero for giving his life to the cause of protecting the city. In his dying state, Roselia walked up to him to offer him a new identity as her hero, the Undead King. And while he wondered why she was inviting him to join her, she told him she had always had her eyes on him. Back in the present, Leonis wakes up from sleep and remembers that finding Roselia and restoring her Demon Lord army to its former glory is his current task as given to him by Roselia 1,000 years ago, before his reincarnation. He suddenly feels a sting in his neck and heads over to Celia's to wake her from sleep with his sorcery. She is shocked and tells him it was as though someone poured cold water on her to wake her, to which he responds by explaining that the crest on the back of his hand symbolizes dominance, which he uses for controlling his minions, so forcing her into consciousness is one of the many things he can do to her. She immediately becomes embarrassed when she reasons that this must also mean that he can force her to do dirty stuff with him, but he tells her to cut the crap, as he is a gentleman who would not take advantage of ugly women. However, he tells her he also expects her to be sane and not steal red juice from him while he sleeps like she did the previous night. Celia suddenly receives a call from Philip, who informs her about a strategy meeting that was called some minutes earlier. She reveals that it has to be because of the research team, which was sent on a marine investigation but has not uploaded any report on the database. This surprises Celia, but the call soon ends with Philip telling her she will inform her that she has more updates. After the call, Celia tells Leonis that since today is a lecture-free day, she wants him to whip her till she can't walk properly.
What do you mean by that?
Bro tells her to watch a master at work. At the same time, the authorities in charge pulled a strategy meeting about the sudden cut in communications with the research team. After a while of yapping about what no one watching gives about, they still don't know what the cause is even though they had picked up signs of a void attack. Celia's training begins, and after wasting time with some void simulators, Leonis thinks of putting her to some real challenge, so he creates a barrier around them to prevent anyone outside from seeing them. And then, he summons a bunch of skeletons he calls his soldiers, shocking her. She immediately begins to clap them, and after a while, she starts to pant because of how intense the clapping was. Leonis commends her skill, and she thanks him for making her stronger. As a reward, she offers to treat him to a nice meal of rice cakes and melons only, which embarrasses him. Meanwhile, on her way to Philip's room, Sakuya meets a stray dog and decides to pet him before giving the proceeds from one of her gambling escapades. But she is completely unaware that it is Blackus. She heads on in to meet Regina and Philip, and while she takes some tea that Regina prepared, Philip informs them that a recon squad has been sent to investigate what happened to the platoon that went on the marine survey and never returned. As they wonder if the the second Titan submersible implosion had occurred. A few moments later, Philip asks Regina for Celia's whereabouts, and she replies that she must be somewhere out there wasting away as usual. And of course, she is wasting away just as predicted. But this time, it is with Leonis as they wander around the city. As they move around, Leonis is fascinated by how developed the human civilization has become. At the same time, Sherry works as a maid in a restaurant, and while she is given a bowl of potatoes to slice in preparation for French fries, the idiot pieces the whole thing with the bowl included. Realizing how dumb she is, the owner tells her to go sweep the sidewalk outside instead before she ruins his business. Meanwhile, on her way out, she suddenly notices Celia and her master pull up in a nice ride. She quickly hides and peeps, jealous that Leonis is spending time with some low-class he recently met. They soon get to a local restaurant, and when Leonis sees the little ugly orphans there, he remembers when he was also an orphan in the trenches, but he realizes that these trolls have it better than him, who was almost dying of starvation. As they settle down, one little cultured creep suddenly pulls up Celia's skirt for a raw 4K footage of her bunda, immediately causing Leonis to attempt to drag him into Hades, but Celia tells him to calm his balls, saying the dude is just a little boy. Celia soon reveals that Leonis is a holy swordsman, and the kids start to glaze over him, making him quite uncomfortable because he hates stupid kids.
Them kids.
The little puppets soon rush towards Celia when they hear she brought some donuts, and Leonis realizes that this is a place she wants to protect, unlike himself, who has no place like that anymore. Meanwhile, on the other side, Sakuya and Philip suddenly notice something strange. At the same time, some workers in the 7th Assault Garden suddenly find a network of roots inside the facility and wonder what is going on. A brief insight into Leonis' past occurs, showing when some horrible monsters invaded the town, and the only thing an old man who looked like Odin could think of doing was to summon a mini sun to scourge everyone, including the monsters and people, and then revive the people after. However, Leonis thought this was bullshit, so he countered the summon with a strike from his sword and then went on to take on the monsters all by himself. Seeing this, the old man said he would use his power to dig his grave someday. In the present, all this company of morons analyzes the ongoing situation with their boomer's intelligence and can't make out any reasonable thing about what is happening. They receive a request from Philip to share the results of her investigation, so she proceeds to show some charts and compares them with the sound waves of the vibrations blah blah blah. The yapping goes on for 5 freaking minutes, but we will skip to the good parts, where she makes a conclusion that there is a void activity going on underground the facility. The old creeps are shocked and can't believe this, wondering how the heck the voids managed to creep in without them detecting the mana fluctuations. Philip states that the void must have intentionally hidden that so it could find its way in without their notice, shocking them even more since voids are very wonderful creatures void of intelligence. They suddenly receive a report that thick, root-like vegetation is growing in the underground storeroom, and they immediately ask someone to get out there to assess the situation. Meanwhile, Regina tries to get through to Celia, but can't reach her, so Philip decides to send out her Eye of the Witch drones to where she is. At the same time, Celia and Leonis eat the meal she just prepared with the kids, and while at it, this ugly brat suddenly demands to see Leonis' long holy sword, the one down there, making him pissed. Back in the facility, some soldiers finally discover the growing roots in the storeroom, and while they await in order to eliminate it, the roots suddenly grow eerie eyes on them, and the transmission cuts immediately. However, the transmission is soon restored, and the soldiers on site report that the roots have escaped. They wonder why the void is attacking underground, and one of them says that it's probably because the facility's underground security is lacking, unlike the air security. After further analysis, they suddenly realize that the monster is heading for the power plant, and considering that it is a void lord, gaining access to the power plant could result in a massive void invasion known as a stampede. Upon this realization, they immediately order that the power plant be protected from the monster at all costs. However, the monster soon enters the room containing the power plant, and no matter how they try to fight it, it remains active. Seeing that a stampede is imminent, this ugly monocled dude, almost looking like Voldemort, resorts to this final decision. The 7th Assault Garden will shift into fortress mode, and all civilians will be evacuated to shelter as all the military personnel prepare for a stampede. With all these going on, Celia and Leonis are unaware of anything as they continue spending time with those kids. Leonis even demonstrates skeleton acrobatics to amuse the kids. The monster soon penetrates the power plant, which cuts the power supply throughout the city, immediately alerting Celia and Leonis. They step out to see what is happening, only to find the Excalibur Academy switching to fortress mode and a myriad of voids turning up en masse like they have been invited to a TikTok wrist party. Now that the facility is in fortress mode, the Holy Swordsmen have to keep the voids from penetrating for the next 3 days till they receive help from the capital. A massive fire is unleashed from the facility, and it looks like water is gushing out of the fire service's water pumps. Sakuya, Philip, and Regina immediately activate their holy swords and unleash attacks on the incoming voids, which which fascinates Leonis, who is watching from afar at how impressive the facility's weaponry is. Celia immediately heads inside, stating that they need to protect everyone. But as Leonis attempts to follow, Sherry suddenly appears, waiting to receive his orders. He is surprised that she came just in time, and she replies that it is not like she was tailing him and Celia or anything like that.
Stop the cap.
Leonis feels she is a bit cheeky but says her mission is to protect Celia's friends, making her disappointed as she expected she would protect him instead. As Celia thinks of what to do with these many weak dependent little humans, some voids suddenly appear for lunch. She quickly steps out to face them, and as she activates her holy sword, Leonis, knowing that she has yet to unlock her full potential as the vampire queen, asks her if she isn't scared. She replies that she is, but a man's gotta what a man's gotta do. He is amused and says she can't let these mofos ruin such a precious minion, so he summons his staff and gives the monsters a taste of hell before sending them there, surprising Celia. More terrible monsters start to appear, giving Leonis a nostalgic feeling of his past as a hero. Just as the girls rest after eliminating the monster within their radius, a Hydra-class monster and some fire-breathing dragons appear. Leonis then tells Celia to cover him while he casts powerful sorcery on the dragons. He immediately unleashes a rain of fire on the dragon, but it withstands it, surprising him and making him think that his situation is no different from Goku trapped in Oolong's body. He then activates another level 10 sorcery that crushes the dragon to the ground, shocking Celia that he defeated a mega-colossal void. However, an earthquake suddenly occurs that splits the ground, and the root monster captures Celia before revealing itself, which Leonis immediately recognizes as Ericale. He is surprised they are meeting again after 1,000 years. As he prepares to fight, he notices that Ericale is responsible for the stampede, so he immediately charges at it, but it escapes before he can cause any damage. Leonis, however, checks the crest on his hand to confirm that Celia is still alive, and he reasons that Ericale's goal must be to lure him out. He decides to play along, but this time, he is determined to destroy him once and for all. Blackus emerges from the ground and exclaims that their archenemy is back, but this time as an unrecognizable godforsaken monster merely called the Void Leader. However, Leonis says that seeing Ericale resurrected means that Roselia must also be alive somewhere. Blackus then notices the kids standing afar, staring at Leonis, and just when Leonis thinks they are gawking at him because of his power, a girl suddenly thanks him for protecting them, and then tells him to protect Celia too. He is shocked to realize that they are disgusted by him after all, and he pats her head before declaring that he will do all he can to bring Celia back alive. Then, he creates a barrier over the house and summons 2 undead soldiers to guard them, telling them they will be safe as long as they remain inside the barrier. As he leaves to go face Ericale, he reasons that though he doesn't give a shit about human lives, he has to protect the ones that are dear to his minions, so he doesn't look like a jerk than he already is. One of Philip's eye drones appears, calling unto Celia and demanding that she come over immediately to join them in fighting against the Hydra-class void. However, Leonis tells her that Celia has been captured by one of the voids and he is just about to go retrieve her. He then asks Philip to help him determine her location using her holy sword's tracking abilities, but she replies that it is too dangerous, telling him that the platoon in charge of that district should handle it. And when Leonis states that there is no one else there, she tells him to wait a little longer. He immediately cuts in and tells her that Celia may be watching them from heaven by then, so Philip closes her eyes to track where Celia might be. However, the Hydra-class void suddenly comes for her, but Sherry saves her ass just in time. Following this, Leonis rides on Blackus' back and heads for the power plant where they believe Celia is. Upon getting there, he finds Ericale and immediately unleashes a fire attack, but Ericale regenerates immediately, amusing Leonis. They exchange some verbal abuses like sissies, and then Ericale reveals that this world shall be rebuilt along with the empty star. However, Leonis doesn't understand what the heck that means, and Ericale further states that he has been chosen to be the bringer of glad tidings. Leonis hears Celia in pain and immediately launches an attack again, but after jumping back and forth for a while alongside Blackus, and with no reasonable progress made, they realize that their sorcery is becoming a mere acrobatic performance by the second, because Ericale is sapping their mana from them. Ericale instantly activates Lex Megiddo and rains a barrage of attacks on them, but they manage to evade them. Leonis casts another spell and attacks, but Ericale blocks it with a force barrier. Leonis, realizing they are getting weaker, looks at the blood on his palm and tells Blackus that things are about to get crazy. Meanwhile, Celia becomes desperate to protect Leonis and feels sad that she is not any better than when she was young, when her parents and siblings died. However, as blood drips from her body, her holy sword becomes activated and thorns begin to emerge from her blood. Leonis suddenly calls her and hits her with a tiny bit of his mana-infused blood, immediately giving her enough strength to break loose from Ericale's bondage. Seeing this, Ericale becomes enraged and decides to burn the whole city down, including himself, by activating multiple simultaneous simultaneous level 10 spells. With nothing else to do, Leonis approaches Arakel and prepares to fight it with the demon sword which was granted to him by Roselia. Blackus asks him if he really wants to do this, because Roselia had informed him that he cannot use the sword until certain conditions have been met. He declares that the current condition is to protect his demon kingdom, so he instantly unsheaths the sword for the first time and then chants some spells that Roselia taught him, fully unleashing its power. Arakel is shocked that he has this sword and wonders how he got it. However, he tells Leonis that it is impossible to change the world's destiny, but Leonis replies that he will conquer destiny with his own two hands. He immediately unleashes the Ragnar's Kingdom School's secret sword technique, Ragna lost on Arakel, instantly e-seconding it. Then suddenly, all the other voids in the city immediately start to disappear, shocking those idiots in the control room who think they survived the stampede because Mother Luck decided to smile at them. Celia and Leonis return to the surface, and they are happily received by Philip and co. Following this, Leonis lies down exhausted on his bed because he unlocked the powers of the demon sword, causing him to hate the frailty of the human body. Celia soon appears and asks him for some blood, saying that wielding the holy sword consumes a lot of blood, while she sucks blood from his finger. The other girls suddenly barge in and wonder what the heck she is doing in such a sus position. Some days after the stampede, Leonis tries to access the vault with his ID, but he is denied access. Then, an owl spirit standing by tells him the access has to be authorized by the Administration Bureau. Leonis explains that he is a student and thus should be allowed to enter, but the owl spirit insists that he put in a request with the Bureau. However, Regina suddenly closes his eyes from behind and teases him a little by rubbing melons on his back. She is surprised he is here, and he tells her he came to do some research on the ancient language, written all around the cave he was trapped in, as it might help him figure out how to restore his lost memory files. Hearing this, Regina sympathizes with him, and then walks up to the owl spirit and asks it to allow them in, looking into its eyes. However, as the owl declines the request again, it suddenly gets hypnotized, and it tells them to go right in, surprising Leonis, who immediately asks if Regina is a spirit medium, but she tells him no, saying it was just a little parlor trick. Regina also reveals that the artificial elementals are manufactured by the Thilla Foundation, so she has her ways, and hearing this, Leonis discovers that even the spirits are artificially made in this age, prompting him to ask about the real spirits. However, Regina tells him many of them were destroyed since the Void's invasion started. Meanwhile, as the conversation continues, they suddenly receive an invitation to the commendation ceremony hosted by the royal princess, Arteria, and on seeing this, Leonis thinks that this is his chance to find out about the upper echelons of the human empire. Meanwhile, somewhere in the middle of the forest, some very ugly demi-humans plan on how to kidnap the princess in the upcoming commendation ceremony, so they can demand the release of their brethren who are captured in the imperial prison. However, Elza snaps them out of their delulu by pointing out that holding out against the humans would be difficult because they possess holy swords, unlike them, who only have their useless, disgusting faces. This leads to a little argument as Elza is seen as a killjoy, but an elf suddenly appears out of the woods to tell them she can help them capture the princess as they desire by bestowing power upon them that surpasses a holy sword. She immediately summons a demon sword and channels its power into Basta's body, instantly making him more powerful. The demi-humans are shocked by this, but at the same time excited because their delulu is about to become a reality. However, the elf asks them if they will also be kind enough to fulfill her humble request in return, which is to keep the holy swordsman alive and deliver them to her. They immediately agree to this and ask her for her name, to which she replies that she is Sharnik the Witch. Getting to the venue of the commendation ceremony, Leonis observes the environment and is fascinated by the battleships made by humans, thinking that two of these should be useful when he is rebuilding the Demon Lord army. He soon comes across a jewelry store and decides to get Celia a gift, which he gives to her as soon as he meets her. She becomes excited and tells him that rizzing up girls like this is exactly how he gets to open their legs whenever he wants, making him embarrassed. He then asked about Regina, who seems like one who loves parties, but they tell him she has other priorities at the moment. Meanwhile, an arrogant bastard named Fenris appears and immediately gets into a brief argument with Celia, but Philip separates them before it turns into a typical hair-pulling showdown. While this continues, the demi-humans secretly unalive some guards and steal their faces for a perfect disguise. The ceremony soon begins, and Leonis checks through the copy of the reference materials he had made using a spell. He realizes that someone is attempting to cover up the historical past, as there isn't a single mention of the gods, the 6 heroes, the goddess of rebellion, or even the 8 demon lords. Sherry suddenly appears and reports that the ship is powered by a mana crystal and has similar defenses to the assault garden, surprising him. However, she quickly vanishes when Celia appears in a sus bikini, revealing her medium-sized bazookas, and on seeing her, Leonis immediately feels like inserting his long, powerful sword there. the children with Celia ask him to come play with them in the pool, and when he tries to decline, they force him into the pool. As Celia teaches him how to float on water, Duke can't keep his focus because he is not the only one floating. Celia's balloons are also. A few minutes later, while the princess heads to the event hall to give her speech, her guards are suddenly attacked by the disguised demi-humans, and they transform back into their original forms. As they capture her, Arteria frees her carbuncle, which runs off immediately. At the same time, chaos begins in the audience chamber as the demi-humans suddenly reveal themselves and hold everyone hostage. This starved goblin summons an apple bomb and threatens to detonate it if any holy swordsmen activate their holy swords. Assessing the situation, Leomis whispers to Celia that he will go after the princess while she handles the situation here instead. Then, he suddenly vanishes. Meanwhile, Basti tells the princess to order the ship toward the capital with her telekinetic ability, but she warns that they will be heading into a void reef ahead. Basti instructs her to swerve around it, but Charnock objects and says they are heading right into it, immediately causing a defiance from Basti, who states that that would be a stupid and dangerous move. However, Charnock replies that she doesn't give a crap about their initial plans, immediately making Basti realize that she is just some selfish bitch who has deceived them. He prepares to attack her immediately, but she roasts him alive. Outside the ship suddenly starts to leave the harbor, shocking the onlookers because it was scheduled to leave the next day. Regina is surprised to see the carbuncle, and as she bends over to pet it, it tells her about the situation on the ship, so she quickly runs after the ship before it goes too far. On entering the ship, she runs into Leonis and declares that her little sister is in danger. Regina then starts to narrate the truth about her identity. She was born to the royal family on the night the red star was shining in the sky, and because this meant bad omen, she was sentenced to be escalated. However, one of Duke Crystalia's sons secretly brought her back to his home and nurtured her as his own daughter. Moreover, as she grew, she had to become the personal maid of their biological daughter to keep her identity concealed. Regina reveals that she belongs to the royal family, and only her platoon mates know about this. She adds that she had come here hoping to catch a glimpse of her sister from afar, but met the carbuncle at the harbor. Leomis asks if the spirit belongs to Arteria, and Regina explains that members of the royal family possess the spirit medium abilities of princess priestesses. She further states that the carbuncle is a real spirit that is used to control the ship, surprising Leonis, who wonders how the ship is moving despite its separation from the princess. He then reveals that her sister is being held hostage by a cabal of demi-humans who have also hijacked the ship, but he assures her that Celia and the other holy swordsmen are handling the situation, so they only have to focus on saving the princess. They immediately get into action, with the carbuncle leading the way. Meanwhile, in the audience chamber, Philip tells Celia she has analyzed the bomb's functionality with one of her drones hidden behind the chandelier, and she discovered that the wand with the goblin sends a signal that triggers detonation. So if they can block the signal, they should be able to prevent an explosion. They decide to act fast, and looking around, Celia finds a hairpin behind her, so she grabs it and pierces her finger, knowing that she can use her vampire blood as a weapon instead of the prohibited holy sword. On reaching the control room, Regina realizes that the demi-humans have locked course, making it impossible for her to steer the ship. She then considers communicating with the princess through the carbuncle, but she fears this might reveal her existence. However, Leomis tells her to ditch that thought and focus on what's more important at the moment, which is saving the princess, so she carries the carbuncle and successfully connects with Arteria immediately. Arteria reveals that they are taking her to the flight deck, but she tells Regina to focus more on regaining control of the ship because it is heading for Void Reef. Arteria gives her the access code to the lowermost deck, and Leomis tells Regina to head there immediately while he heads to the flight deck instead to save the princess. In the audience chamber, Celia stealthily makes a long thread wire, and as soon as she signals it to Philip, she activates the jammer that temporarily shuts down the wand, and Celia breaks it with her thread. They soon manage to overpower the demi-humans, and the apple bomb disappears. However, they suddenly notice a strange activity outside and realize that they are now in the middle of a void reef. The voids start to invade, and as they fight against them, Leonis reaches Celia through telepathy, asking about the situation of the ship. After reporting what's happening, Leonis tells her to go and watch Regina's back while he makes arrangements to handle the voids. Celia heads over to the lowermost deck immediately, and after finding several voids on her way with Regina, they finally reach there. Regina immediately connects the carbuncle and starts controlling the ship. Meanwhile, as Charnock gets into the chopper with Arteria, she attempts to fly off, but Leonis gets there on time to stop her. She comes down from the chopper and faces Leonis, demanding to know who the heck he is, and he introduces himself as the Demon Lord, making her pissed as she can't take an idiotic wannabe pretending to be the legendary Demon Lord. She immediately launches a powerful fire attack, but Leonis deflects it easily, shocking her. She asks him how he could deflect a spell made by the Demon Lord, and he replies that that is exactly why it won't work, because he created the spell. He then captures her with his shadow demon and asks her why she did this, to which she replies that she wants to corrupt the holy swordsman with nothingness, forge demon swords swords and offer them to the goddess. He is shocked and asks which goddess she is referring to, but before she can answer, the evil thrashing blade called Zolgstar Mazekis isekahais her instantly. Leonis is surprised to see a demon lord slayer and wonders why it is here. However, Zolgstar transforms into a huge void and begins to attack him, but he manages to evade its attack while also ensuring that the smaller voids don't get to the princess. Meanwhile, Regina suddenly begins to control the ship's weaponry and attacking Zolgstar, and while at it, Celia joins Leonis on the flight deck. Many more voids appear, and Celia buys Leonis some time by entertaining them while Leonis prepares to unsheath his demon sword. He immediately activates Ragna Lost as he slashes towards Zolgstar, sending it to hell instantly. The next day, after the ship returns to the harbor, Princess Arteria appreciates all the holy swordsmen who were instrumental in saving the ship, and then she asks about Leonis and the spirit medium, who helped take back control of the ship, but they tell her she won't be seeing them due to one thing or the other. However, Celia delivers Regina's farewell message to Arteria. Meanwhile, Leonis feels terrible while lying on his bed that his muscles are sore, and he couldn't gather much information about the goddess. Some days later, the royal guards discover the hideouts of the demi-humans and arrest them for the conspiracy to kidnap the princess and hijack the ship. One of the guards states that they better keep their ass down and now try to resist, or they will have a taste of the wrath of his holy sword. However, a strange monster suddenly appears and casts a spell, instantly turning them into the Statue of Liberty ripoffs. The demi-humans wonder who he is, and he immediately casts a spell that knocks them to their knees before introducing himself as Zolvatus, the demon lord and rightful ruler of this world. He then offers to grant them a place of refuge if they devote themselves to him. They immediately accept the offer since they don't have much of a choice, and he names them Devil Wolves before creating an underground labyrinth invisible to humans where they can hide and become stronger against the Empire. However, he loses 1,000 aura when he suddenly receives a call from Celia asking to know where his ugly ass is. Apparently, it is Leonis disguised as a monster. Meanwhile, back at the dorm, Celia wakes up from sleep and visits Leomis' room, where she shockingly sees Sherry, but Sherry quickly disappears, making her think she was only hallucinating. She searches the whole place for him, and when she can't find him, she decides to shower so she can go look for him. Just then, Leonis reappears in his room, and he feels disappointed as he returns to his true form that Celia has been too protective of him like a toddler. However, he is glad that he has managed to recruit the remnants of the demi-humans organization, which is a major step towards rebuilding his demonic army. Later, while they eat breakfast, Celia whines in his ears about the need to eat vegetables if he wants to be healthy, just like every vegan mom. But this only makes Leonis skeptical about her intention, as he wonders if she is deliberately feeding him vegetables to dilute his blood so that it's easier for to drink. They suddenly hear the sounds of crows, making Regina disgusted as she thinks of chasing them away. While Celia tries to be nice, Regina reminds her of the common belief that their dorm is haunted since strange things like some ghost maid appearing randomly have been happening. Celia immediately adds that she saw the ghost girl earlier cleaning Leonis' room, and upon hearing this, Leonis loses his balance, knowing that they are talking about Sherry. However, Celia asks Leonis where the heck he went to earlier today, and he lies that he went on some solo training in preparation for today's practice match against Fenris platoon. Later during the practice match, Celia starts off by destroying one of the opponent's subflags, while Sakuya proceeds to distract Fenris minions. This creates a free path for Celia and Leonis to go through so they can destroy the remaining 3 subflags, but Fenris, already aware that this would be their strategy, had reserved one of her frost wolves, which suddenly attacks Celia. As soon as she appears, Celia asks her if she is really dialing it down on her attacks as they were asked, because this stings as fuck, and Fenris replies that this is only 1/10 of her normal strength. She then gaps for a minute before launching an attack at Celia, who eventually gets knocked at a tree. Fenris then sends her frost wolves to pin her to the tree. At the same time, Leonis battles with Fenris's partner and manages to grapple her with his shadow demon till she passes out. Celia begins some self-motivational talking and instantly breaks off the ice lock. She then charges at Fenris before launching an overwhelming attack that knocks her to the ground, making him the winner. That night, on the other side of town, a void lord named Nephekis sacrifices the demon swords forged from ruining several holy swordsmen to the goddess of prophecy, while also mourning Sharnak's death and wondering who Isaac'd her. Suddenly, a tear occurs in the atmosphere in the middle of the ocean, and a landmass appears out of nowhere, which the Excalibur Academy folks later recognize as the Third Assault Garden, Celia's hometown that vanished into void territory 6 years ago. They discover the city is sailing toward them, and they need to stop it to avoid clashing into the Seventh Assault garden. The personnel also informed them that distress signals were sent on 2 different occasions, which could mean there are survivors in the city. Following this, Celia's platoon receives the mission to sweep the city and gather all the information they can about the city in the next 72 hours. The next day, while they prepare to set out for the 3rd assault garden, Leonis meets Sherry and Blackus secretly, telling them about the sacred order's insignia he spotted among the ruins of the city, and he says he needs to find out who is responsible for this. He tells Blackus to watch over the 7th assault garden while he is away, but orders Sherry to accompany him instead. They soon take off, and on their way, Regina forces him to lay his head on her lap and begins to clean his ear for him, causing Leonis to relive the moment when goddess Roselia told him she would no longer be by his side while resting her head on his leg. Leonis told her to stop the expensive jokes, but she further stated that she would be reincarnated 1,000 years in the future and asked him if he would come looking for her when that happened, regardless of what form she may take. Leonis assured her that he would make sure he found her no matter what it took. Platoon 18 soon lands in the city, and as they begin to explore the city ruins, Celia suddenly receives a signal warning against an incoming void, but before she can make any move, a black angel void suddenly launches an attack, pinning Celia to the ground. Just 10 minutes before Celia's platoon got to the location, an ugly elf named Arl suddenly got reincarnated 1,000 years from the past, and after dressing up in the clothes she found in an abandoned thrift store, she reasoned that since she was sent here, it meant the goddess was going to be reborn here. As she observed the strange environment, she saw Celia's platoon's flight landing from afar. She initially thought it was a dragon, but Nephicus suddenly appeared behind her and told the idiot that it was a large bird. He then told her he was surprised to be granted an audience with the great Alfiro, shocking her. She asked if he also came from the past, and he confirmed yes, but said that the difference between them was that they had 2 vastly different objectives. Arl was here to destroy the goddess vessel using the evil slashing blade, while Nephicus, on the other hand, is the guardian of the goddess vessel. Knowing this, Arl immediately lunged toward him, but he disappeared before she could attack him. Then, a black angel emerged in the sky. After Celia gets pinned to the ground, the black angel attempts to blast her ass into the afterworld, but Leonis quickly saves her by creating a black hole beneath her that instantly teleports her to safety. He then exchanges some attacks with the black angel, and judging from his sorcery level, he realizes that it's a void mimicking an angel. Meanwhile, the other members of the platoon notice that there is something going on where Celia and Leonis went, so they quickly head there too. After a series of intense exchanges between Leonis and the black angel, Leonis crashes the void to the ground and then crushes him with a massive illuminated ball attack, sickening it. He quickly heads over to where Celia is, and as he talks with her, still wounded, some ghosts suddenly appear, which Celia immediately recognizes as her father's personal attendants from the crests on their clothes. Leonis reasons that souls who have deep attachments and lingering regrets being trapped in battle sites are common occurrences in his past, but he is surprised it is also happening here. The ghosts reveal that they sent the distress signal, and they did it not so they can be rescued, but to warn them about a looming stampede due to the appearance of a new Void Lord. And if they are not careful, the same thing that occurred 6 years is doomed to repeat itself. It also revealed that the Void Lord melded itself with the city's power plant and is now amassing energy, which will soon lead to its awakening. Hearing this, Celia says they need to hurry up and check so they can have proof to show the authorities back in Excalibur about the impending threat. But Leonis thinks no one would believe a ghost told me as a reliable source of information. He then tells Celia that she needs a place to chill because of her injury, and the ghosts offer to take her to her father's mansion, saying that they have prepared a car. A limo soon appears, and Celia wonders how this is even possible. Meanwhile, because no one should trust a ghost as your Uber driver, or you'd soon become one too, Leonis summons his undead horses, and they turn a freaking limo into a chariot. Meanwhile, as Philip, Sakuya, and Regina search the city, they suddenly come across Arl, who immediately challenges them. However, Sakuya manages to overpower her in a fight, but she admits that it would have been the other way round if Arl wasn't injured. At the same time in the limo, Celia begs Leonis for his blood and pounces on him to start sucking, but he wishes it was his cream instead. Celia receives a call from Philip via the intercom to find out what's up, and Celia explains that there might be a Void Lord lurking in the city. Philip also reveals that they found a survivor, shocking Celia. After the call, Leonis unveils a present he has for Celia, the True Ancestor dress, which has the ability to convert a vampire queen's mana into physical strength. However, he warns that even though her power will increase exponentially, her mana will also be consumed at a rapid rate, so she should be wise. She absorbs the dress into her body, and Celia gives her the memo on how to summon it whenever she wants to use it. She asks him why he is giving her this now, and he replies that he thought her weak and stupid wasn't ready for it just yet, but now that things have come to this, he has to hope she would do great, as he can't afford her getting hurt again. Afterward, he summons skeleton keychains and gives them to her as good luck charms. In a different part of the city, Philip makes some introductions and then asks Arl why she is here, and she replies that she came to vanquish the goddess, but they don't know what the heck she is talking about, making Arl wonder who their history teacher was in school. Meanwhile, Sherry, keeping a watch on them, recites Arl's LinkedIn bio and wonders why the elf hero, who once tried to isekai her master, is here. Celia and Leonis soon arrive at the Duke's mansion, which is now in ruins, and Celia heads upstairs immediately. However, Leonis sees a chair that reminds him of his throne, and he sits on it. He then brings out his bone and starts wiping it gently. Celia walks around the mansion reminiscing about his family. She soon reaches a library where her father usually fabricated fake Santa Claus stories for her, and she begins crying. Seeing this, the ghosts signal to each other and immediately bend toward the ground to recreate a scene from when she was young, shocking her. She sees her father telling a tale about the demon lord, and as she watches on, the scene gets disturbed by Nefak's appearance. Moreover, she thinks it's another survivor of the ruins, but this only makes Nefakis angry, and he immediately fires an attack at her, knocking her unconscious. Leonis hears her scream with his bone still in his hand and quickly rushes to the scene to see what is happening. While unconscious, Celia recalls the last time she saw her father, right before the stampede that occurred 6 years ago. She had volunteered to fight alongside him, but he declined her offer, kneeling down to remind her of the story about the demon lord. He reassured her that even though the demon lord was a force of evil, one day he would come to their world and vanquish the void. In the present, Celia regains consciousness and finds herself surrounded by 3 skeletal warriors guarding her. Nefakis, believing his previous attack had finished her off, is shocked to see the undead protecting her. Assuming that Celia must have summoned them, he tells her, "Watch this," and attempts an attack, but before he can strike, Leonis charges in, unleashing a powerful blast of fire magic. Curious about her protectors, Celia asks who the skeletons are, and Leonis explains that they are the skeleton keychains he entrusted to her earlier. The skeletons then introduce themselves, but Celia instantly realizes that they were a bunch of fools when they were alive as they argue over their accomplishments as warriors. Suddenly, Nefakis rises and claps, impressed by Leonis' fire magic. He admits that if he were an ordinary human, he would have been reduced to ashes, but Leonis immediately recognizes Nefakis and becomes shocked as he wonders why he's here. However, Nefakis doesn't know who the heck Leonis is. Nefakis launches another fire-based attack, but Leonis easily overpowers it, leaving Nefakis questioning how such a power is possible. Just as Leonis begins to demand what Nefakis is truly after, the ground trembles beneath them. Nefakis begins to laugh, and then declares that St. Tyrus has consumed his offerings and become the vessel of the goddess. Nefakis immediately opens a dark portal, and though Leonis tries to catch him using his shadow demon, his efforts are deflected, allowing Nefakis to escape. Celia soon joins Leonis and asks him who the mysterious goddess is, but Leonis admits he doesn't know either. However, he does recognize Nefakis as an associate of the Lord of the Underworld who always came to the Demon Lord gatherings regularly. Just then, the symbol of the Sacred Order appears in the sky, prompting the piles of bones to suggest they get to their heels. Once they've reached a safer distance, they witness the so-called goddess rising from the earth. The ghosts appear at this moment and confirm that the being they are seeing is the Void Lord they were warning them about. The Void creatures circle the goddess and begin to chant the Sacred Order hymn, surprising Leonis. As the goddess begins to act, the surrounding voids attack, and Leonis and Celia ready themselves for battle. Meanwhile, Philip mentions to her colleagues that she's called for reinforcements and advises an evacuation, but there is no way that is even possible. So they decide to regroup with Celia and Leonis, while Regina and Sakuya hold off the voids, and Philip finds the means to transport them to safety. Outside, Celia and the undead soldiers struggle to take down the voids, which frustratingly keep regenerating, and at the same time, Regina and Sakuya aren't having it any easier. Philip then steps in to scan the voids with her drones, hoping to find their weak points. Meanwhile, Leonis manages to blast one of the voids' heads off, noticing that this prevents it from regenerating. He quickly informs the others about this, and Philip's analysis confirms this. With this knowledge, both teams begin to batch dispatch the monsters to the great beyond. However, they soon realize that the goddess is approaching. In the meantime, Philip discovers some bikes for the group, and the girls quickly head out, with Arl following closely behind. On the battlefield, the piles of skeletons continue to wipe out the voids alongside Celia, while Leonis prepares to face the largest threat. He unleashes a powerful spell, summoning a mini sun aimed at the goddess, and although it initially seems like his plan worked since the goddess got burnt terribly, she emerges again unharmed, surprising Leonis, who begins to think he is toast. Things escalate when she begins begins activating multiple magic circles, signaling an even greater danger. Leonis and the skeletons immediately form a protective barrier as the goddess unleashes a barrage of fireballs, engulfing the entire area in flames. As more void creatures approach, Leonis asks Celia to provide cover so he can finally destroy the goddess. She agrees, and the skeletons join in as well. Celia immediately cuts herself using her blood ability, and together with the help of the 3 skeleton soldiers, they manage to wreak havoc on the voids. Meanwhile, Leonis quickly jumps into the air and then unsheaths his demon sword as he prepares to end the life of the pain in the goddess. However, just as he's about to strike, he freezes as though someone had said English or Spanish, and the sword starts resonating. He then hears Roselia's voice coming from the Void Lord, telling him that he should ditch the thought of using the sword on her. Refusing to believe it's truly Roselia, Leonis presses on and attacks. However, the goddess blocks his strike and retaliates by sending giant arrows flying in every direction, with one piercing right through Leonis in the process, badly wounding him. Celia rushes to help him, but realizes the goddess is preparing another attack. In response, she immediately summons the dinner date gown Leonis gave her and launches a strong attack, temporarily bringing down the goddess. The skeleton warriors continue battling the remaining monsters, and afterward, they gather around Leonis. In his unconscious state, Leonis recalls a memory with Roselia, where he had promised to find her again in the future. However, Roselia had made him swear that if she ever became something else, he would isekai her with his demon sword and find her real self. Back in the present, Leonis wishes Celia would just drain all his blood and escape to safety, as this is the only viable option at the moment. However, instead, Celia begins to channel her own blood into his body to heal him. Leonis soon regains his strength and a renewed sense of purpose. Since his demon sword managed to strike the so-called goddess, he realizes that she couldn't be the true Roselia. Determined to deal with the imposter once and for all, he expresses his gratitude to Celia for her healing aid. Needing to patch his torn clothes, he requests a piece of fabric from Celia's dress, which she willingly tears off for him. After fixing his attire, Leonis prepares to confront the Void Lord, which is beginning to rise again. He asks for Celia's support as he moves in for the final blow, though he admits his strength has diminished and hopes he can summon enough power for one more attack. Just then, William interrupts, suggesting they convert their souls into a magical energy source. William, along with the souls of citizens who met tragic fates, seek revenge and offer themselves for Leonis' magic. Leonis suspects that Tyrus' resurrection powers are to blame for the ghost town's recent emergence and agrees to the plan. He chants a spell, summoning a magical orb that begins absorbing the souls. However, he tells William and his comrades that he has another plan for them to make them useful, so he creates skeletal bodies for them to inhabit, allowing them to fight once again. He instructs Celia to lead these reanimated soldiers into battle while he focuses on gathering energy for his demon sword. Accepting the task, Celia uses her blood to create spears for the warriors and stands ready to protect Leonis. Meanwhile, Philip successfully hacks into the bikes, but just as they are about to leave, Arl approaches, asking to join them. Although they hesitate because of her injuries, a void suddenly appears behind her, and she swiftly takes it down in one blow. She explains that her sword has the power to defeat their enemies, and seeing that she is so determined to die, Sakuya agrees to let her come along with them. On the battlefield, the undead clash with the voids, taking out as many as they can, while Leonis continues absorbing the souls of the citizens as fast as he possibly can. The girls try to reach them quickly, but are soon surrounded by voids, so Philip takes control of the bikes, allowing the girls to focus on fighting. At the same time, Celia orders the troops to change formation, but a void sneaks up on her while she's distracted and knocks her down. Fortunately, a skeleton catches her in time. Celia admits her dress is weighing her down more than expected, but she refuses to stand by idly like the weakling she was 6 years ago, even if it means risking her miserable life. The skeletons respect her for her motivational speech, though one of them jokingly reminds her they're already dead anyway. Meanwhile, Leonis continues to gather energy as the Void Lord also prepares a powerful magical assault, creating several magic circles in the air again. Leonis urges everyone to retreat, prompting Celia to give orders to the men. Despite the fireballs raining down from the voids, they all manage to reach safety while Leonis continues working his magic. Meanwhile, Philip grows anxious since she is unable to establish contact with Celia. Arl notices that the Void Lord is still at a distance, so she decides to conserve her energy until she can make a move. Suddenly, a massive void suddenly appears and attempts to attack them, and they're unable to dodge it. Just before it strikes, a rope appears from nowhere, slamming the void into a nearby ruin. However, Sherry isn't feeling this whole thing because her role in the battle is damn too easy. Back at the main battle, Leonis is almost done gathering souls when he notices the Void Lord charging up for another attack, so he begins channeling his magic into his sword to counter the attack, but the Void Lord hurls a massive building toward them. Seeing this, Celia quickly steps up and flies forward to destroy the structure, giving Leonis the time he needs to finish his incantation and charge his sword. However, just as Leonis is about to strike, the Void Lord casts a high-level protection spell, battle, catching Leonis by surprise. At that moment, the girls arrive close enough to help, with Regina and Sakuya unleashing their powers to assault the barrier. Arl steps forward and uses her sword, effortlessly breaking through the barrier and wounding the Void Lord. Leonis is left wondering who could possess such power as the girls crash to the ground after being thrown off their bikes. This distraction gives Leonis the perfect opening to attack, revealing the Void Lord's true nature as a false goddess. With a decisive strike from his demon sword, he completely destroys the fake goddess while the others look on. Celia, in particular, recalls her father's advice at this moment. As the skies clear, William and his men bid their final farewells, having no more regrets. Celia vows to continue fighting in her family's honor as she watches them fade away forever. With the battle finally concluded, Leonis recalls his boneheads back into his shadow just as Regina rushes over to embrace Celia. Philip and Sakuya join them, carrying an unconscious Arl. Sakuya praises Arl as the one responsible for defeating the Demon King, and Leonis, upon seeing her, immediately recognizes who she is. Just then, reinforcements arrive to assist, and the group boards one of the ships. While on board, Leonis muses about why the elven hero from legend is present in this era. But when Celia questions him about it, he brushes it off. She begins recounting the stories her father told her about a demon king who rode skeletal horses and supposedly breathed fire. Annoyed, Leonis insists he never did that, but when Celia challenges him on how he could be sure, he relents. Finally, when he asks how these stories ended, she tells him the hero always defeated the Demon King, to which Leonis dismissively declares the tales to be nonsense. Later on, Leonis reunites with Blackus and Sherry. Blackus recalls his past interactions with Neflicus, mentioning that something always seemed off about him. They decide to confront him and get some answers the next time they encountered him, but Sherry adds that Leonis needs to be cautious of the elf too. Leonis asks what's going on with her, and Sherry explains that she's being held at the airport's medical facility. Leonis then instructs Sherry to find out the elf's true intentions. Just then, Celia calls out to Leonis, causing Blackus and Sherry to disappear as she enters, dressed only in a towel, which immediately sends his magnum to 90 degrees. Celia asks for another drinking session, and he playfully asks her to take it easy on him this time, but the bloodthirsty bitch pounces on him and starts drinking away. Meanwhile, Philip is busy piecing together the recent events, trying to figure out how they're all connected. During her investigation, she stumbles upon a highly secured file. Elsewhere, Sakuya continues honing her swordsmanship as she realizes she is not as good as she thinks after seeing Arl's expertise. Arl, on the other hand, wakes up in the hospital and realizes that her mission is not yet over since she hasn't vanished, so she sneaks into a room and grabs her sword, which she then uses to escape the hospital. Meanwhile, Leonis grins, amused by the chaos unfolding in his domain, and as he adjusts to this new phase of his life, he is determined to expand his rule until all of humanity is under his control. The end. If you have reached this far, let's confuse the fake fans by commenting "Rip Leo." Also, give this video a like. If you like anime recaps like this, then watch this video over here.